Dan, thank you so much for being a part of this. I know that you're extremely busy and we really value your time today. So we'll just get started straight into the questions. And to begin with, I just wanted to ask you if you could share your perspectives on how practicing mindfulness can impact the structure and activity of the brain.
Yes. Well, mindful awareness is a wonderful way to actually improve your health. So it improves your immune system. Being present has been shown to increase an enzyme called telomerase, which maintains and repairs the ends of your chromosomes, called telomeres. Some studies even suggest that the way you live a life of meaning and compassion can improve the regulation of gene expression. So I'm happy to talk about the brain, but the good news is the whole body seems to respond well to mindfulness. Mm-hmm. In the brain itself, the way to think about it is the focus of attention is what allows us to stream energy and information through the brain. And so this focus of attention in a mindful way, I believe, basically activates certain capacities to differentiate a sensing circuit, which is more lateralized, from a more centrally located observing circuit. And both are important in mindfulness, but when you differentiate them and then link them, you actually create a state called integration. So areas of the brain that integrate, for example, the sensations in the body with the cortex, such as the anterior insula, that gets thicker with mindfulness meditation, as you show in functional studies, is actually being activated more. If you look at the hippocampus, which is involved not just in memory, but also in emotion regulation, that's activated more. There are lots of ways, even in different aspects of the prefrontal cortex, that you are using your systems of focusing attention in a systematic way that strengthens them. And also it decreases the activation of a part of the brain that creates anxiety, the amygdala. And so that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. So all these things are basically good functional changes and structural changes for the brain.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Would you mind just saying a little bit more about the two? You were talking about the observational and the sensory and the lateral and medial. Could you just say a little bit more about that in the beginning of that answer?
Well, some people equate mindfulness with just being in the flow of sensation. And I don't think that that's accurate, though a lot of people now are kind of saying that. The word flow meaning you lose self-consciousness and lose yourself in the unfolding of sensory experience. While that's a very important capacity to be able to choose to have, one also needs an observing part of yourself that's a little more distant from sensation that could say, oh, I'm angry right now, I shouldn't hit someone. Or, I have all these choices, even though I feel like doing this choice, let me think about the other options and choose the most adaptive option, what I call response flexibility. Those are all more midline prefrontal abilities to put a buffer between an impulse or a sensation and an action. And so I believe very deeply that the research supports the idea that mindful awareness is a combination of strengthening the sensory capacity, so you know the difference between sensing and observing, but also strengthening observing capacity so you can observe where your attention is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so when you say, so you're talking about sensing as in like sensations in the body, as in when anger comes up, it might be heat or what you notice from a physical sensation perspective, but then the observation side of it being realizing anger is here. This is
exactly and making sure you can distinguish between those two is, I think, what mindfulness is all about, because it involves both, not just one.
Thank you. Move on to the next question, which I suppose you've pretty much touched on, but if there was anything else you wanted to say about how mindfulness then supports emotional balance.
Well, it's a really interesting question. Why does mindfulness support emotional balance? Because it does. Why does mindfulness improve your immune function? Because it does. Why does mindfulness improve empathy? So what I've written about with my colleagues is the following idea, that when you have the differentiation of an observing self from a sensing self, you are giving yourself in many ways permission to differentiate these two circuits and then link them. That creates a state of integration that, if you wanted to put more common English language to it, you would say something like, I give myself permission to feel whatever I feel. I give myself permission to experience whatever I experience, and I can also observe myself experiencing it. So I'm both experiencing it and observing it with a loving heart, with a loving mind, with a loving, and I usually don't separate heart and mind, so I don't know why I just did, but with a loving set of stances. It's kind of an internal stance. So yes, mindfulness, and Shauna Shapiro talks about this too, as does John Kabat-Zinn and Jack Kornfield, that mindfulness has a loving stance to it. So I think one reason why it helps with emotional balance, to put it very simply, is that if you develop the skill of accepting your feelings for what they are and not fighting them, you've created this incredible state of acceptance and love that decreases cortisol, your stress hormone, that increases your, Steve Porges has a wonderful set of circuits he talks about this. It increases your social engagement circuits. So I have an acronym called PART. When you're present for yourself like this and attuned to yourself, this is internal attunement, focusing on your internal world, resonate with yourself, where an observing self accepts and allows itself to feel the experiencing self's experience, you develop trust, the T of PART. So this part you can do internally with mindful awareness, you can do it interpersonally with a supportive relationship.
Great acronym. That's great.
That's the part we play. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm kind of a problem. I'm an acronym addict.
It's the occupational hazard that comes with medical training, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you for that explanation. That's really clear, very, very helpful for people. And it kind of segues into the next question I had, which was that I've heard you say in the past that mindfulness is a way of becoming your own best friend.
Yes.
So was there anything more that you wanted to say about that, or you'd kind of already mentioned this loving stance?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about how a best friend would interact with you, and you can incorporate that stance toward yourself, I mean, then you've got mindful awareness in many ways. The key, embracing with, curiosity, openness, acceptance, and love. There's another acronym, COAL. These are the features of mindful awareness: being curious about what's going on, being open to it, accepting, and loving. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can you say a little bit more about your thoughts around the relationship between mindfulness practice or mindful awareness and the development of empathy, compassion, and a sense of an interconnectedness?
Sure. I think that the word self, S-E-L-F, has an unfortunate connotation, a definition we usually use, that it's defined by the boundary of our skin, that's defined by the body. And the problem with that, the problem with that is that it leaves a person with a false belief that they're really alone. And I think in mindful awareness, what can happen, doesn't always happen, but what can happen is one becomes aware that, in fact, the substance of subjective experience, what I believe is energy and information flow, and some people don't like that phrase, but anyway, I use it, energy and information flow that is moving through your body is just as easily able to move from your body, like between me and you right now, all around the planet through these wires. Mm-hmm. So we are fundamentally connected to each other, and the interconnected part is the idea that the self, in fact, is distributed, that it doesn't need to be thought of in a way that I think is erroneous and dangerous as being only in your body. And part of this book I just wrote, Brainstorm, was to offer adolescents who read the book this opportunity to really think deeply about the incredible positive outcome of seeing the truth of our interconnected nature. Positive for your own sense of well-being, positive for people in your life, positive for people on the planet, positive for the health of the whole planet. So this is, what I hope will emerge as people will realize the truth of our interconnectedness.
Thank you. I think you've described the mind as being a relational process and not just limited to the brain. Can you explain this and give us a sense of its significance? Again, it sort of connects, I think, with a bit what you were just saying.
There's a number of books I've written about this subject: The Developing Mind, The Pocket Guide to Interpersonal Neurobiology, The Mindful Brain, The Mindful Therapist. So if you want to know the background of all that, those books will have it.
Yeah.
For just briefly saying here, the mind does not have a definition in virtually any field that exists except this field that I work in called interpersonal neurobiology, which is a strange finding. So that psychology, psychiatry, anthropology, sociology, even philosophy of mind, education, all these different disciplines that work with the mind don't really define what the mind is. So the definition that came a long time ago was the idea that beyond subjective experience and beyond consciousness, there is a third aspect of mind that can be seen as an emergent property of a complex system. And the complex system is that of energy and information flow. And the key thing is that this flow of energy, which sometimes has symbolic value we call information, is happening not just inside your body. It's certainly not just happening inside your skull, but it's also happening between you and other people, for example. So the mind as an emergent self-organizing process is both embodied, not just enskulled, it's embodied, and it's relational, and it is doing something very specific. It is regulating the flow of energy and information. So this is where the statement comes that the mind is as much relational as it is embodied. Mm-hmm. And when you then say, well, how does self-organization move a system in a useful way? Then there's a long line of reasoning behind the following statement. Integration, the linkage of differentiated parts of a system, produces the optimal self-organizational movement of that system that has the acronym FACES. Flexible, adaptive, coherent is something that's sticking together well over time. Mm-hmm. Energized and stable, that's the FACES flow of harmony, basically. So integration creates this FACES flow of harmony. And in our view, integration is the basis of health. It's the basis of healthy regulation of mm-hmm. attention, emotion, thought, behavior. So mm-hmm. basically, this process that is self-organizing uses integration to create optimal self-organization that creates harmony. We believe that's health. And then the fun thing about that is you can identify when a system is not integrated because it goes to chaos or rigidity. Mm-hmm. And then you can then identify the domain you want to work with and move the system toward integration. It becomes a very comprehensive approach. And mindful awareness then would be one form of mind training to literally create integration, this flow of energy and information. I think it integrates the brain, and I think it allows for integrative relationships, which are basically compassionate, kind, empathic relationships where you understand another person with empathy, you are kind to them, meaning you support and honor one another's vulnerability, and you're compassionate, meaning you feel their pain and you reach out to help them.
Thank you. Could you tell us a bit about your latest book? I know you've written so many.
I got to tell you, the book is called Brainstorm, and it's been quite exciting. When my kids finished their teenage years and now are in their young 20s as adolescents still, I wanted to write a book that an adolescent could read directly about themselves to understand what the new science of the adolescent brain was telling us, different from many of the myths that, at least in the United States, are really confusing parents and disempowering adolescents. That there's an essence to adolescence that we can cultivate well when we acknowledge what it is. And this essence is actually the crucial way of living as an adult to keep your brain young. And so luckily, the word essence spells the features. So ES is emotional spark. Keep passion in your life. And adolescence, definitely, life is on fire during that period. And we need to keep that going, keep the fire going when we're adults. So emotional spark, social engagement, keep your social networks really robust, keep them alive. And adolescents really start moving more to their peers than their parents, and that's fine. They don't have to reject their parents totally, but they should really be encouraged to have social connections. N is novelty, new things. The adolescent brain is changing in a way that gets them ready for the unfamiliar, the uncertain, really the unsafe of home life leaving them and going out into the world. So to get ready to leave the nest, they've got to have something changing in their brain. That's this movement toward novelty. And there's various ways the brain changes to support that. And then creative explorations, the CE. So emotional spark, ES. SE is social engagement, and novelty. CE is creative exploration. This is really the way the brain is thinking outside the box, pushing against the adult world, trying to imagine a new world. And we need this not only as individuals to get ready to push away from where we've come and not be stuck with the status quo, but we need it also as a human family to face some of the world's gravest problems and to really find innovative ways of solving those problems. So my deepest hope for the Brainstorm book is adolescents will find it supportive, adults will find it supportive, it'll increase their communication, but we might tap into this incredible creativity, this incredible courage of this period of life for the benefit of all people and benefit of the planet.
Fantastic. Finally, can you suggest, are there any books of other writers that you've read in the past that have impacted you positively or shifted your thinking in some way that you would like to suggest?
Yeah, well, there are many, many books. I mean, there's a book by Christakis and Fowler called Connected, which talks about the many hidden ways we all influence each other. That's a really beautiful book. Lou Cossolino's book, The Social Neuroscience of Education, is very exciting. Sir Ken Robinson's book on elements for adolescents to find their passion, that's a really beautiful book. John O'Donoghue's book, Anam Cara, as well as Beauty, and his poetry books, those are fantastic books. Diane Ackerman's book, which is called 100 Names for Love, is exquisite. It's really fantastic.
I heard you state somewhere that the only way we are going to save our planet is with awareness. Could you say something more about that?
I think awareness, when it's filled with presence, has the potential to dissolve the delusion that we're separate from each other. And in that transformation of identity, of realizing our interconnected nature, and at the end of the Brainstorm book, I call that a MWE, M-W-E, a me and a we as one identity. I think that kind of awareness, that transformation of identity, is the only way we're going to change the path that we're on as a species, so negatively influencing the planet that we use it kind of like a garbage can. Instead, I think if we have an identity of a we, we'll realize that everything we do is interconnected to everything else that happens, and we'll live a more mindful life. And that's all comes from awareness.
Beautiful. I think that's a lovely place to end. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
If there was anything else that feels like you want to share it that I haven't asked you about around your work or anything, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to do that, because you've obviously got such a huge body of work. We couldn't cover it.
Yeah. Well, I guess I would say one little thing, which is this concept of integration, linking differentiated parts within us and between us. The simple way to realize how important integration is in our lives is by really looking at the notion that when integration is made visible, kindness and compassion are what emerge. And so we've heard that from many spiritual teachings, many wisdom traditions. From a scientific point of view, integration is the basis of kindness and compassion. When we honor each other's differences and promote compassionate linkages, when we're kind to each other and honor and support each other's vulnerability. So in many ways, the awareness that has the potential to transform the world is about integrating our lives in our interconnected lives, integrating an identity as a me and a we that we realize is one whole. And I feel very deeply that the more we can move with mindful awareness practices, with time in, with working together in creating months of mindfulness, of really doing things that we can support each other, all these movements will create a kinder, more compassionate world where we are aware of our interconnected nature and can really take care of our common home.
Thank you.